Listen, this Norwegian fisherman had been working the Atlantic waters off Maine for 18 years, bringing in cod and lobster with the steady rhythm of someone born to the sea. But when a Category 4 hurricane trapped dozens of boats in deadly conditions that would kill anyone caught in open water, what he did next revealed why someone with his background chose commercial fishing over military service, and why his understanding of Arctic maritime warfare ran deeper than the North Sea itself. Rockland Harbor, Maine, was home to one of the last working fishing fleets on the New England coast, where independent boat owners still made their living from cod, haddock, and Maine's famous lobsters. The harbor sheltered 43 vessels, ranging from small dayboats to larger draggers capable of week-long fishing trips in Atlantic waters. Eric Anderson had been fishing out of Rockland for 18 years, operating a 42-foot lobster boat called Nordkapp that he'd bought used and maintained with the meticulous care of someone who understood that equipment failure at sea meant death. His boat was known for its seaworthiness and his reputation for bringing crews home safely, even when weather turned dangerous. Eric was respected by other fishermen for his ability to read weather patterns that satellite forecasts missed, his knowledge of currents and underwater terrain that affected fish populations, and his calm leadership during the rough conditions that made Atlantic fishing one of America's most dangerous occupations. What made Eric exceptional as a fisherman wasn't just his seamanship or his understanding of marine biology. It was his ability to make tactical decisions under extreme conditions, to coordinate rescue operations when other boats were in distress, and to navigate safely through conditions that would challenge military vessels. His American fishing colleagues assumed this expertise came from growing up in Norway's maritime culture and 18 years of New England fishing experience. They had no idea it came from 12 years as a coastal ranger with the Norwegian Armed Forces, conducting Arctic naval operations in conditions that would kill most sailors within minutes of exposure. Sergeant Eric Anderson had served with Marine Jegerkommanduen, Norway's elite naval special operations unit, specializing in Arctic maritime warfare, coastal reconnaissance, and extreme cold weather operations. He'd been trained to... Eric had conducted missions in the Norwegian Sea, Barents Sea, and Arctic Ocean, operating in conditions where normal naval vessels couldn't function, and where survival required understanding Arctic maritime warfare techniques that few militaries in the world had mastered. His specialty had been cold water rescue operations and navigation in ice-filled waters where GPS systems failed and traditional seamanship was inadequate. Eric had left Norwegian military service not because he couldn't handle Arctic operations, but because he'd served his required time and wanted to use his maritime skills in civilian work that still connected him to the sea he loved. Immigration to Maine had seemed perfect, using his understanding of dangerous waters to make a living from fishing rather than warfare, serving the sea rather than military objectives. For 18 years, it had been exactly the peaceful maritime life he'd wanted. Until September 15th, when Hurricane Patricia approached the Maine coast with winds that would turn Rockland Harbor into a maritime killing field. Eric was securing his boat for Hurricane Patricia's arrival when emergency radio traffic indicated that several fishing vessels had been caught offshore when the storm intensified faster than forecasted. Instead of the Category 2 hurricane that weather services had predicted, Patricia had exploded into a Category 4 monster with sustained winds of 150 miles per hour and waves exceeding 40 feet. 13 fishing boats with 47 crew members were trapped in conditions that exceeded anything in Maine maritime history. Coast Guard rescue helicopters couldn't fly in winds above 60 miles per hour, and rescue vessels couldn't operate safely in seas that would sink anything smaller than a destroyer. Eric processed the emergency situation, using knowledge gained from 12 years of Arctic naval operations. The trapped fishermen had maybe 6 hours before hypothermia and equipment failure would begin killing crews, assuming their boats could survive seas that were already destroying vessels built to handle North Atlantic conditions. Standard rescue procedures involved waiting for the storm to weaken and then deploying Coast Guard assets when conditions became marginally survivable. The trapped fishermen didn't have 12 hours to wait for marginally survivable conditions. Eric made a decision based on 18 years of Maine fishing and 12 years of Arctic naval warfare. Using his understanding of Arctic storm patterns and extreme weather seamanship, Eric developed a plan that would allow experienced fishing boats to reach the trapped vessels by using hurricane conditions rather than fighting against them. "Rockland Harbor, this is Eric Anderson aboard Nordkapp," he called on emergency frequency. "I'm coordinating rescue operations for trapped fishing vessels. Need all boat captains with Arctic or heavy weather experience to respond immediately." "Eric, this is Harbor Master Control. Coast Guard has suspended all rescue operations due to weather conditions exceeding safe operational limits." "Harbor Master, I've got 12 years Arctic naval operations experience. These conditions are survivable if you know Arctic storm tactics. The trapped boats don't have time to wait for the storm to pass." Eric's mention of Arctic naval experience transformed the radio communications. Harbor masters and Coast Guard coordinators suddenly understood they were talking to someone with expertise in extreme weather maritime operations. Eric coordinated with 8 other fishing boat captains who had either military maritime experience or extensive heavy weather fishing backgrounds. Using tactics adapted from Norwegian Arctic naval operations, they formed a rescue convoy capable of operating in hurricane conditions that would destroy individual vessels. The rescue technique Eric implemented required understanding how Arctic storm systems could be used for tactical advantage rather than simply endured. By positioning rescue vessels to use hurricane winds and currents for propulsion assistance, the convoy could reach trapped boats while maintaining enough power reserves for return trips. "Rescue convoy, this is Nordkapp lead," Eric called as 9 fishing vessels departed Rockland Harbor in conditions that violated every civilian maritime safety protocol. "Maintain formation spacing for wind shadow protection. Use storm surge for forward momentum on approach legs." Eric was essentially commanding a naval operation using civilian fishing boats, applying Arctic warfare tactics to hurricane rescue operations. He understood how to use extreme weather as a tactical advantage rather than simply surviving it. The rescue convoy reached the first trapped fishing vessel 43 minutes after departing harbor, in seas that were running 35-foot waves with sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. For the next 8 hours, Eric coordinated rescue operations that saved 47 lives under conditions that Coast Guard accident reports would later classify as unsurvivable for civilian vessels. Using techniques learned during Arctic naval training, Eric's convoy rescued crews from 13 disabled fishing boats, evacuated injured personnel who required immediate medical attention, and guided damaged vessels that could still navigate back to harbor through seas that would have sunk them without expert piloting assistance. The rescue operations required seamanship abilities that most civilian mariners never develop. Navigation without GPS in conditions where electronic systems failed, vessel handling in seas that could flip boats without warning, and coordination of multiple rescue operations while maintaining convoy integrity in hurricane-force winds. "Coast Guard Rescue, this is Nordkapp lead," Eric called during the 7th rescue operation. "We've recovered 31 personnel from disabled vessels, have medical emergencies requiring immediate evacuation, and are escorting 4 damaged boats back to harbor." "Nordkapp lead, how are you maintaining operations in Category 4 conditions?" Arctic naval training. Learned how to use storm systems for tactical advantage instead of just surviving them. These conditions are challenging but manageable with proper techniques. By 11:47 p.m., all trapped fishing vessels had been either rescued or escorted safely back to Rockland Harbor. 0 fatalities, despite conditions that should have killed anyone caught in open water. The hurricane rescue operation made regional maritime news. Norwegian Fisherman leads impossible hurricane rescue. but details were limited because few people understood the technical expertise that had made the rescues possible. Coast Guard District Commander Captain Sarah Walsh conducted interviews with rescue participants, trying to understand how civilian fishing boats had successfully operated in conditions that exceeded military vessel capabilities. "Eric, what you accomplished last night, coordinating rescue operations in Category 4 hurricane conditions, where did you learn techniques for operating vessels in extreme weather?" Eric was repairing storm damage to Nordkapp, using maintenance procedures he'd learned for keeping Arctic naval vessels operational in conditions that destroyed equipment designed for temperate waters. "Norwegian Navy," Eric said quietly. "Marine Jägerkommandoen, Coastal Rangers. 12 years conducting Arctic operations in conditions that make hurricanes look mild." "Coastal Rangers? That's elite naval special operations." "Yes. Trained for Arctic maritime warfare, extreme cold water operations, navigation in conditions where normal seamanship." Captain Walsh looked at rescue reports that documented successful operations in weather conditions that exceeded Coast Guard operational limits. "Eric, why are you working as a commercial fisherman? With your naval background, you could be training rescue personnel or commanding Coast Guard vessels." Eric smiled. "Captain, I spent 12 years learning how to fight wars at sea. Commercial fishing lets me use those same skills to feed people instead of killing them. Last night just required using both skill sets." After the hurricane rescue, Eric received offers from Coast Guard training facilities, maritime rescue organizations, and naval contractors specializing in extreme weather operations. His demonstration of Arctic naval expertise had proven valuable for improving civilian maritime safety. The opportunities offered recognition, significantly better compensation, and the chance to use his full naval training professionally again. Eric considered each offer carefully, but chose to continue commercial fishing out of Rockland Harbor. "I came to America to be a fisherman, not to return to naval service," Eric told the Coast Guard recruiter. "But I'm happy to help train rescue personnel in Arctic weather techniques during off-season months." Eric continued operating Nordkapp as a commercial fishing vessel, but his role had expanded to include coordination with Coast Guard rescue operations and training fishing boat captains in extreme weather survival techniques. 2 years after Hurricane Patricia, Eric had become the unofficial coordinator for Maine's fishing fleet emergency response capabilities, training boat captains in heavy weather operations, and developing protocols for civilian maritime rescue that incorporated techniques from Arctic naval warfare. His approach, using extreme weather conditions as tactical advantages rather than simply surviving them, became part of Coast Guard training programs for regions that experienced severe maritime weather. Eric also established relationships with Norwegian maritime authorities, facilitating exchange programs that brought Arctic seamanship techniques to American waters, while sharing New England fishing knowledge with Norwegian commercial fishing operations. But Eric's greatest contribution was proving that military maritime skills could be adapted for civilian rescue operations, that techniques learned for naval warfare could save lives in peacetime, and that the most effective rescue coordination often came from mariners who understood both military. Drop a comment about the international professionals who've impressed you with knowledge that went far beyond their job descriptions. The mariners, pilots, engineers, or specialists whose foreign training proved invaluable when emergencies arose. Because here on the Human Stories, we honor the naval veterans who came to America and chose civilian maritime careers, using their military seamanship to save lives rather than wage wars, to serve communities rather than command fleets. Thanks for watching, guys. If this story moved you, share it with someone who appreciates the complex maritime backgrounds that immigrants bring to American waters. Hit subscribe to help us celebrate those who left military service behind but never stopped serving the sea. And the next time you see commercial fishermen heading out in rough weather, remember Eric Anderson. Remember that some of the most skilled mariners learned their seamanship in Arctic waters, where survival meant mastering techniques that few sailors ever encounter. Because sometimes the most important naval operations happen when former military mariners use their expertise to bring people safely home from the sea, proving that the greatest victories are measured not in enemies defeated, but in lives saved. That's what real sailors do. They keep serving the sea, whatever form that service takes.